I speak to you in the name of one God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. In January of 2017, I had the opportunity, along with many classmates at my seminary, to go study in the Holy Land for a month. And because of various circumstances, which included getting snowed in Istanbul, with the airport completely closed, a few of my traveling companions and I were 2 days late for the start of our course. So the very first experience I had of the Holy Land was landing in Tel Aviv in the dark, taking a shuttle from Tel Aviv to St. George's College, which is the Anglican Education Center and Pilgrimage Center in Jerusalem, all in the dark. And we woke up in the morning, too early for my preference on that day, got in a bus, to which I promptly fell asleep, and drove somewhere into the Judean wilderness, during which time my seatmate woke me up and said, "We got to get off the bus." So we hiked up a little hill, and to me it looked just completely barren. There wasn't necessarily anything extraordinary. I didn't at the time see mountains. It just kind of looked like a desert, and nothing stunningly beautiful to my eyes. But when we walked up this small kind of hill on my side, it felt like small from where we parked the bus, we got up and I looked and saw a massive canyon just over the other side of this hill. And this canyon is called Wadi Kelt. And essentially, it's a long canyon type thing that extends from Jericho to Jerusalem. And it's been created by this relatively tiny stream. And it's breathtaking. And right across from where we were is a monastery called St. George's, and right now it's Greek Orthodox, I believe. But it's this monastery that's built into the side of a cliff. And it is just breathtaking. And in that moment, one of our guides started telling us the story of the Good Samaritan. You see, Wadi Kelt, as I mentioned, is this canyon that runs from Jericho to Jerusalem. It's about 18 miles. And it really was the only road, only path through the wilderness, through the mountains, that had fresh water for you to travel from Jericho to Jerusalem. So if you were moving from one city to the other, there really was only one option to walk. It was this road to Jerusalem or to Jericho. There's no other option. So when Jesus launches into this parable that we now call the Good Samaritan, his hearers would have pictured this Wadi Kelt. They would have understood that it was a road that was regularly targeted by thieves, that it actually was a very dangerous road because it was the only road. So those crafted-minded individuals who were trying to take advantage of travelers knew that this was the only way they could come. Jesus' hearers would know that this was targeted by thieves, and people getting beat and robbed was a regular occurrence along this path. They would have known that sometimes people used decoys, children, or other adults who would lay on the roadside looking beat, looking dead, hoping that you were naive enough to stop and try to help. And when you did, then others who were hiding would come out, attack you, and rob you. In our hearing, it's pretty shocking for us to hear that a priest or a Levite would see somebody who was very clearly beaten, perhaps dying, and intentionally go to the other side. Especially as a priest, it's hard to hear that. But what Jesus is reflecting in this moment is that for his hearers, that would be expected. In fact, it was the wise move to do. Because if you were at risk of being beat and robbed, you weren't going to get where you were going, and quite frankly, your life was at risk not to cross the road. So the priest and the Levite were the wise ones. They were doing what the hearers expected them to do. The shocking thing for Jesus' hearers would have been that anyone stopped. That anyone stopped to help this man, let alone a Samaritan, somebody who was considered an outsider, who was dirty. The shock is that, but the shock is also that anyone would stop and risk their own life to help someone out. And not only did this man stop and check on him at great risk to himself, but he took time with him. He bandaged his wounds, he cleaned them. He put this man on his own donkey, I'm going to assume, took him to an inn, tended him overnight, and then in the morning gave over 2 days' wages to the innkeeper with a command to continue to tend to this man. He spared no expense, both of his time, of his physical person, and of his money to support this man. Now, it's interesting that this parable is offered in response to a lawyer's question, "Who is my neighbor?" This is one instance of many in which Jesus didn't answer the question. He ended the parable, though, back with a question to this lawyer. Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hand of the robbers? Jesus appears to be less concerned with the question of who is my neighbor, and more concerned with what kind of neighbor are you? Jesus' answer to who is my neighbor is actually pretty darn clear in this parable and in the way he lived his life. Our neighbors are anyone or everyone. That's it. Short parable. The harder question to grapple with is, what kind of neighbors are we? What kind of neighbors are you? According to Jesus, being a neighbor means that we have to be open to seeing those around us, seeing their pain, being willing to stop and sit with them in that pain, even at personal risks to ourselves. We are to invest of ourselves, our muscles, our sweat, our resources, our money, our time, into the well-being and the health of others. We need to show mercy and compassion to be a good neighbor. And just like this lawyer, I think sometimes we are more comfortable sticking with the question of who our neighbors are. And even as a fairly progressive church, in a fairly progressive denomination, I know I'm quick to say that we are very LGBTQIA affirming, that we are a diverse congregation with people of color in different leadership positions, and that we have a new bishop who's a female and a person of color going to be consecrated in 2 months. That we are affirming of women's ordinations and support of a woman's right to choose as a denomination. Our understanding of who our neighbors are is broad, and it is inclusive. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're always living into the call to be good neighbors all the time. As Sean mentioned, our General Convention is in session right now. And this is our national church's big opportunity to explore our governance and the way that we function as a church. If you haven't been following it, I encourage you to do so. It's in session right now. And recently, we've been hearing many stories from Episcopalians throughout our church to whom we have historically not been good neighbors to. Especially yesterday, our Indigenous siblings who are asking our church to explore our role in Indian boarding schools and to take our responsibility for our history. And this is the same with our church's role in slavery and the founding and the fabric of this nation. We can be quick to say that Black Lives Matter or to put a sign in a window. But have we been good neighbors, taking time to explore our own role in perpetuating white supremacy and our benefits from this sinful system? We pray for gun violence every week in this church. And I know that this week our heart aches for our neighbors north of us in Highland Park who experienced a violent tragedy on Monday. But our neighbors suffer gun violence every day on the south and the west sides of Chicago. It's a daily occurrence. Since July 1st, Chicago has lost 22 people to gun violence. And I pulled that number yesterday afternoon. So it's probably higher. As Jesus posed this question to a lawyer 2,000 years ago, who then was a neighbor to this man who was beaten and robbed? We are faced with the exact same question. Who are we neighbors to? Fill in the blank. I am proud to be a part of this church, and I'm proud to be a part of the Anglican and Episcopal tradition. And I love that we're known as a church where you're not just welcome, you belong. But pointing out who we think is our neighbor is not enough. We need to be neighbors. We need to live into that title. We need to live into the call to show mercy and love and compassion to those around us. As we learn from the Good Samaritan, we need to give of ourselves. We need to show up, potentially at cost to ourselves, financial cost, relational cost of our time and productivity. Being a neighbor means you stop sometimes. We invest in the people who need it. We sit with someone. Just as the Good Samaritan, or I would like to call this person the good neighbor, if we can't help somebody, sometimes it means we find somebody else who can. Just like he passed this man off to the innkeeper because he needed to keep going. No matter what, we do not ignore. Being a neighbor, being a good neighbor, is truly a practice. And it's one we're working on day in and day out. Sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we don't. And thankfully, this is a great community to do that in. To come together and do a scan, to scan ourselves and figure out where we might need to do some work to increase our ability to be good neighbors, both as individuals and as a community. Is there something we need to do to target, to improve? We're working towards our neighbor identity in many different ways as a community. The ones that come to mind easily for me are our meals ministries, St. James Meals, which is a bagged meal that gets delivered every Monday morning. And Meals Among Us. St. James Meals is a hot meal that we serve out of our kitchen. And Summer in the City, our 2-week summer camp that is about to kick off. These are ways that we show up for our neighbors. We show up with our time and our money and our whole selves. And we're always seeking new ways to live into our neighborly identity, to live into that commandment that Jesus gave us, to go and do likewise. The world is desperate for good neighbors. And I encourage all of us to find the hope in ourselves, the hope in this community, and ultimately the hope in Jesus Christ, who knows that it's not enough to just know who our neighbors are if we're not living into our own identity. So go in peace and be a neighbor. Go and do likewise. Amen.